To trust a woman. The gentleman who was my neighbor before I retired, a successful merchant named Uday, once told me this story about his days as a young man. He told me that he had been the only child of a couple who suffered through a tense marriage. His father was a wealthy trader who had married an exceptionally beautiful woman just because he thought it would showcase his earnings to competitors. Unfortunately, she may have been too beautiful for him, and he never learned to trust her. Even when she was pregnant with Uday, their only son, he suspected her of infidelity. It was not until the boy was born, showing a crescent birthmark on his chest, identical to his father's, that the merchant relinquished his suspicions about the pregnancy. The merchant enjoyed his son and he loved him and spent hours playing with the boy or sharing the wisdom he had accumulated in a fruitful life. He taught him how to be assertive around other boys, how to make and invest money, how to mostly conduct himself, and especially also around women. Long before the boy was 10, his father already lectured him about the dangers of feminine wiles. Be careful with women, son, especially the pretty ones. They will lead you on, make you think that they love you, but in truth, they're always planning your downfall. Little Uday did not get much out of these lectures. His father was very disappointed to see the boy run to his mother and ask her what daddy was talking about. The boy loved his mother. She confined herself to the house, managing the household and the servants, often telling him stories and showing him how to worship the gods. He sensed his mother's deep sadness, although her demeanor would suddenly become overly joyful whenever her husband came home. To the boy, this meant that his mother was trying to cheer up old Lemon Face. As Uday grew into a teenager, his father assumed an even more active role in educating him about the ways of the world. He brought him to work in his shop, occasionally even on business trips. Once, when the boy was 15, his father took him to the district capital on a trading expedition. At the end of a long workday, the merchant showed Uday to a famous brothel in order to demonstrate to him just how cunning and dangerous women can be. The madam of the house was a monstrous old woman named Yamajihwa. She had a huge protruding jaw and crooked teeth beneath a bulbous nose. She shrieked in laughter at the sight of the sweet-looking boy and his serious father. "Wait here," she said rudely to the two guests. "I'm in the middle of something." Then she turned to her daughter, who was hardly more attractive than her mother, and said, "So, you hear what I'm telling you? Men are worth only as much as the size of their wallet. The ones with money, even if they're old and ugly, like this one with a kid, you must love. Those who are penniless, even if they look like Karma himself, throw them out. Do you understand?" The girl nodded vigorously, as though trying to make up for an early mistake. The old wench then turned back to her guests and rubbed her hands. "What can I do for you gentlemen today?" She eyed the boy with relish, but the merchant stepped in front of his son. He pulled 10 gold pieces out of his pocket and handed them over to Yamajihwa. "My dear madam, you've already taught my boy everything he needs to know about love. I hope this is enough reward for the lesson." He took the boy's hand and led him out. The old prostitute ran to the alley and called after them, "Come back any time, master. There's plenty more wisdom where that came from." Then she walked back in and slammed the door. By the time Uday turned 16, he was begging his father to let him go out and earn his own fortune. Over his wife's protests, the merchant agreed, but he gave his son a large sum of money to get him started. As a concession to his wife, the merchant agreed to select a companion for the boy, Uday's paternal cousin, Arthadatta, who was 2 years older. The young men set out at the lead of a caravan along the river in the direction of the sea. In a few days, they reached Kanchipuram. a ramshackle town of river traders where even morality was up for sale. They camped some distance outside of town, intending to continue on the very next day. However, that evening the two young men, dressed in fine silken clothes, went to see a dance at a local temple. Uday made eye contact with one of the dancers, the most glamorous woman he had seen in his life. The dancer, Sundari, smiled at him sweetly, and Uday immediately told his companion to return to the caravan and unpack for a long stay. I think I am in love, dear cousin, he said grandly, as a wealthy teenager might. I don't think this is a good idea, Arthadatta pleaded. Why don't we leave right away? But he left the mesmerized boy at the temple and returned to camp. Uday had never been in love, but he always imagined that love would have to be one. Some of his favorite stories were about separated lovers or infatuated heroes having to pass a test or conquer a shy princess. This was thrillingly different. After the performance, Sundari simply came over and touched the young man's feet in respect. She introduced herself, and he introduced himself to the girl, who blushingly invited him to meet her mother. The two women lived in a well appointed house. The foot washing bowl Sundari's mother brought out was covered with gems. The older woman, Makarakanti, was dignified with quick and sharp eyes, like those of a hawk, that seemed to take everything in. The young man found her intimidating, but her devotion to Sundari was obvious, especially when she hugged her daughter and said, He's such a handsome young man and obviously from a respectable family. Be nice to him, my dear. That made Sundari blush again, and Uday felt his own cheeks flush. They lounged on silk pillows all evening, feeding each other fruit and sweets from crystal bowls, which were served by two discreet maidservants. Every now and then, when Uday felt his hostess accidentally brush against his arm or thigh, he recoiled in pleasure. He waited for some signal that he should leave, but it never came. Late the following morning, Arthadatta saw his young cousin entering camp, floating like a sleepwalker. Where were you, young cousin? We were all so worried about you. Uday took that as reproach and snapped out of his reverie. Don't father me, Arthadatta. I spent the night with my beloved. His face softened with the sound of that word. Now, where is the chest? I need to withdraw some money. What for? Asked the cousin. I need to make a small loan to my beautiful Sundari. It's a temporary matter. Where is it? Well, how much do you need? It's not your money and not your concern. But if you must, then it is 1 million. Arthadatta was appalled. 1 million bought you a full stable of the best horses, with food for a lifetime and an army of stable boys with nearly 1/4 of the boy's total wealth. Listen, boy, don't you recognize a scam? You're walking straight into it with your eyes open and your pocket bleeding dinars. The words deeply offended Uday. It was my idea to give her the money. She refused to accept it. So what happened? Her mother persuaded her, sensibly, I thought. She said that because we were lovers, we should be sharing everything and that Sundari might as well accept my offer. You're a damn fool, cousin, and don't forget, it's not your money either. Your father gave it to you. But Arthadatta was wasting his breath. The young man took the money and disappeared again. The trading expedition dissolved into a long idle wait by the river, while the infatuated young merchant spent most of his time at Sundari's house. 2 months went by, and half of Uday's money found its way to his lover. One day, Arthadatta was angry enough to confront his cousin with harsh words. Listen, cousin, you're completely out of your mind. That girl Sundari, she's just a dancer, a performer. Do you have any idea what that means? He got no response and continued. She's a prostitute, man, a whore. She's had other men and now she's out to rob you. Wake up. But even this brutal honesty had no effect on Uday. I know she's a dancer, but she's not like the other ones. She's pure and beautiful, like my mother. You and everyone in father's family are just jealous of beautiful women, but I'm not. Besides, she loves me with all her heart. I can feel it. What you feel is not love, cousin. Trust me. Then Arthadatta had an idea. Look, I'll prove it to you. Let me come with you to Sundari's house, and you suggest that we should leave. She'll drop you on the spot. The young man agreed, and in the presence of Sundari and her mother, Arthadatta executed his plan. Ladies, I'm sad to say this, but Uday and I have spent our fortune and now must resume our business journey. Looking at Sundari, he said, Your beloved will only grow richer and he'll certainly return to you when the time is right. He then paused to observe the reaction. Sundari looked devastated. She began to shake and sob silently, allowing herself to be enfolded within her mother's arms. Then she turned to Uday and said in a pitiable manner, You are abandoning me for the sake of wealth. I was no more than a station on your journey. Oh, my fate, I gave you my heart, she sobbed uncontrollably. But her mother calmed her. Don't cry, my dear. I'm sure he will return. You must let him go now. Arthadatta let his cousin out by the arm. You were wrong. She doesn't want me to go, cried the youngster. But his cousin said, Let's just keep this going a bit longer. We'll lead the animals away from town and see what she does. The next morning, Uday's group prepared early and took the western road out of town, walking slowly toward the coast. Just then, Sundari came running from the city, calling out for her beloved, in despair, her hair blowing wildly. As the men turned to look at her, she suddenly threw herself into a well. Uday reacted quickly, but before he could reach her, 3 shepherds who happened to be near the well scampered down and gingerly carried out the injured woman, whose clothes were in tatters. The merchant was beside himself with guilt. Gathering Sundari into his arms, he begged forgiveness, tearfully promising that he would never leave her again. It was a joyful moment for the 2 lovers, whose great passion burst into flames, fueled by tears and fanned by remorse. Standing off to the side, Arthadatta watched glumly. Uday, now emboldened by conviction, moved into his lover's home. He was hardly ever seen at the camp. Once a week he came to collect clean clothes and more money, then disappeared into his sweetheart's bejeweled bed with its silk canopy. He spent another 2 months of renewed sensual joy until one day he returned to his cousin with ripped clothes, bruises all over his body, and a bewildered look on his face. What happened, cousin? Asked Arthadatta. Uday was too embarrassed or confused to speak. He stared down at his shoeless feet and remained silent. She threw you out, didn't she? She threw you out. What happened? Did you tell her you ran out of money? Well, I did run out of money, but so what? What does she have to do with anything? I thought she loved me. She threw herself into a well for me. Cousin, I have let you down, and I failed your father too. Not only have I not protected your money, I have been unable to teach you even a modicum of common sense. Come on, we're going back. Within hours, the caravan was assembled and turned back upstream. Back at home, Uday's father was furious. I'm very disappointed, son. Didn't I warn you about women? Did you forget what the old war Yamajihwa said? Women are mercenaries, boy, all of them. Uday turned to look at his mother, but she was too meek to say anything. He was in no position to argue either, having lost about 5 million of his father's dinars. Come on, son, we're going back for more instruction, his father barked. By the time the merchant's wife finally spoke up, protesting that the boy needed some rest, and the 2 were already out of the door. Yamajihwa was also furious, but only at herself, and she showed it by laughing and swatting her daughter's head. She threw herself into the well, she roared. She threw herself into a well. That's one of the oldest tricks in the book. I should have warned you about some of these tricks. She turned and slapped her daughter again. Okay, gentlemen, you can have your money back, or you can have my daughter. Which will it be? That made her laugh, and the 2 men looked at each other blankly. Their silence made the old woman shriek. Allah, then again, Allah. Suddenly, a monkey jumped in through the rear window and scampered onto the old woman's shoulder. Gentlemen, meet Allah. She's my gold making animal. You can have her for a few weeks. She will get your money back. How will she do that? Asked the merchant. Just feed her 20 gold pieces every morning and she'll do the rest. The merchant looked at her suspiciously. He was entirely predisposed to suspect the old prostitute of a scam, but this was his town and he knew where to send his friends in the police department if he had to. His son, meanwhile, seemed lost. It was not clear at all that he wanted his money back. On the way home, the merchant warned Uday, Listen, son, I don't know what you're thinking. That girl did not love you. She just wanted your money. You may not believe me, but you will obey. You will take this monkey back to Kanchanapuram and win the money back. It's not negotiable. The young man put on his best clothes and left with a small group, including Arthadatta. The monkey was allowed to sit in the saddle with him. He arrived at Sundari's house looking fresh and eager, and he was greeted earnestly, if not warmly. How nice to see you, my dear young man, said Sundari's mother, who was one who ordered him kicked out as soon as he had admitted to running out of money. Now Sundari came and put her arms around her princely former lover and intoned, Have you come back to show me your love? I'm so sorry. My mother was upset with you. Uday stammered and appeared uncertain as he announced that he was sure of Sundari's love and that he had returned to reclaim it. Well then, to celebrate, you must buy me a lovely meal in the finest restaurant. She clapped her hands excitedly. Before the young man could answer, Ala jumped in through the window, climbed up onto Uday's shoulder, and spit out 3 large gold pieces. The 2 women could not believe their eyes. Sundari, who was quick as her mother, immediately spoke again. And of course, I shall need a new dress. The monkey spit out 2 more gold pieces and some jewelry. 4 gold pieces came flying out. Uday was treated like royalty again, and the next morning he returned to his friend's camp. There he fed the monkey 20 gold pieces and returned to Sundari. They spent the day together, but when the young man saw his beloved flirt endlessly with the monkey, he finally realized that he had only imagined his perfect love. Eventually, Sundari offered to buy the monkey for thousands of dinars, and Uday refused. It was the first time in his young life that Uday had conducted a business transaction, and he was rather pleased with himself. The following morning, Arthadatta, who was thrilled by the recent development, suggested that they feed the monkey 3 days' worth of gold, and the animal gorged itself on 60 pieces. When Sundari and her mother begged to buy the animal in exchange for their entire fortune, including the money they had hoodwinked out of Uday, he finally consented and left the monkey in their possession, along with these instructions. You must let Allah roam about freely. She will spit out the gold only when you make a request. To demonstrate, he asked for 2 gold pieces, and the monkey obliged. The caravan departed, loaded with a huge amount of wealth, with its young leader finally liberated of his false notions of love. Back in town, the 2 women rejoiced over their gold-making creature and greedily demanded more and more bits of gold. After 2 days, when Allah had spit out all there was, the women flew into a violent rage. They realized they had been conned. They attacked poor Allah, where she scampered off and disappeared into the woods. Weeks later, she showed up at her old mistress's house, hungry but happy. The old guide stopped walking and turned to look at me. He seemed very happy with the way he told this story, a major achievement considering that no one could see the story's end halfway through. So, what have you learned from this cautionary little tale, my young friend? Would you rather trust a woman or monkey? He tapped the bilva cane on the stone in soft rhythm till it spoke. If the story is any guidance, I'd go with the animal. Is that what the story is really about? I mean, you've been digging beneath the surface of all your stories. He nodded in agreement and said, Why don't you tell me? You're probably getting the knack of this kind of thing already. Well, why not? I thought the meaning of the story was obvious, even if you didn't take the gold and the mercenary sex literally. I could not be sure how many steps we had climbed. The view below was magnificent. The path reached a right-handed dogleg and a large crimson rose butterfly floated generally in the direction of the sitting spot I was aiming for. The librarian reached out his cane easily, and sure enough, the dark butterfly came to a rest on it. I took that as an invitation to sit too. I think you could say that men's wealth represents our better aspirations, maybe spiritual goals. Women have the effect of distracting a man or draining his spiritual energy through sensuality and comforts. In the previous story, you said that a man must learn how to give up his place in the world. Well, I suppose women represent a huge obstacle to do that. I mean, don't renouncers have to give up sexuality? I know that Buddhist and Christian monks obey vows of celibacy above everything else. As I spoke, the guide watched the butterfly, though he seemed pleased with what I was saying. At the end, I thought he was ready to applaud. Instead, he just wiped some sweat off his face and said, I can't speak for Buddhism or Christianity. As far as P.K. Shivaram is concerned, this is misogynistic nonsense. Okay, I jumped up defensively. I don't mean that the women themselves are obstacles, that they are intrinsically bad. I mean that a man's attachment to woman is what holds him back, the same as his attachment to other things, like cars or like fame. That's a decent recovery, young man, but we could do better. How then? Let's take the story as a parable about the different layers of experience. For instance, the relation between fiction and reality, dreams and waking experience, imagination and memory. Do you follow this? Absolutely not. Did you notice the relationships between the boy and his mother, the ugly old war, and the pretty Sundari? The boy was particularly attached to his loving and beautiful mother, which made him construct an imaginary perfection out of Sundari. The stark realism of the ugly woman and her lesson was completely invisible to him. The imaginary worlds we create around us are projections of what we already know, the mother, and what we already know comes from those things that satisfy our basic survival needs. Isn't that what mothering is all about? So the mother is the satisfying emotional reality. The war is physical reality in its brute and unadorned form. And Sundari is the fantasy or fiction we create by projecting one type of reality onto the other, which we repress. In other words, the women in the story don't stand for things in the world. They stand for different types of worlds. Are you following this? He made sense, I had to admit, at least as far as the theoretical consistency of what he was saying. It didn't seem to match the story closely at all. But I was starting to get used to the fact that he picked and chose his way through anything that suited him in these stories. What does the monkey stand for? I asked. Good question, my friend. The monkey is that principle one uses to reverse the illusion he has created out of his experiences. It has to be an animal, the opposite of humans who engage in world building. It gives back only what you put into it, and although it can deceive, it never does so with prejudice. It only deceives those who are predisposed to deception because they fail to see that it is a mere animal. If you are good to it, it will be good. If you are nasty, it can bite or in some cases sting you with poison. In short, the monkey stands for storytelling. What we are doing right now on this mountain is what the monkey represents in the story in relation to Uday. Restoring a sense of balance, insight to the world in which fiction and reality have become hopelessly mixed, where we fail to realize that what we see is conditioned by what we know. But why a monkey? Why not a dog or a cow? Well, did you see the monkeys at the bottom of the hill? Come to think of it, I did see a few bonnet macaques dozing off on the roof of a booth. They were well fed and contented, unlike the aggressive, flea bitten variety I was used to fighting in Varanasi. I smiled and nodded. They have to be monkeys because monkeys are in between creatures. They are part animal, part human. They walk on the ground or jump in the trees. And monkeys are also mischievous. They jump this way and that. They hurl things at you to get your attention. That's what storytelling does. So, this story is just about literary interpretation and not about religious or mystical ideas at all. The old man feigned anger by sticking out his chin and furrowing his brow, then said in a deep voice, I shall not dignify this kind of a question with an answer. Come, look at this graffiti.